Picture this. You're at a dinner party with film lovers. Someone mentions Christopher Nolan, and suddenly the room erupts. Half the table suddenly insists he's cinema's greatest living auteur, while the other half argues his films are all style, no substance. Technical marvels that leave them emotionally cold. This isn't just another filmmaker debate. This is the Nolan effect. Here's a director whose films have grossed over $5 billion worldwide, who convinced studios to invest hundreds of millions in concepts most executives would dismiss as too complicated for audiences, who's been nominated for multiple Academy Awards, and yet we're still fiercely debating whether his movies are actually good. This doesn't happen with Scorsese or Spielberg or Ari Aster, Richard Linklater, Steven Soderbergh, the list goes on. Why does Christopher Nolan simultaneously occupy the position of Hollywood's most bankable auteur and its most divisive? Today, I'm going to reveal that the answer isn't that Nolan's films aren't either necessarily good or bad. It's that he's created a unique paradox in modern cinema, making intellectual blockbusters that wear the skin of profound art while subverting our expectations about character development and emotional through lines. This is the Nolan Paradox. Understanding it will transform how you watch his films and explain why we can't stop arguing about them well after their debut. This is the cycle of art. I've noticed something fascinating about how we judge cinematic greatness. We typically look for what I'll sum up into two elements: technical excellence and emotional resonance. The films we consider masterpieces usually deliver both. Nolan's unique position comes from consistently delivering technical brilliance while taking a radically different approach to the emotional component. And this creates a fascinating disconnect between what his films promise and what they deliver. Look at how Nolan's films are marketed: operatic trailers, minimalistic posters, Hans Zimmer's thunderous score. Everything about the packaging screams, "This is important cinema." The visual language borrows from art house traditions, while the scale matches Hollywood blockbusters. But when you actually watch a Nolan film, particularly one he's written alone, something unusual happens with the characters. They often function more as vehicles for exploring concepts than as fully realized human beings with internal lives.
I see symbols of encapsulation in every weapons class. This is not one of them. That's what he's after.
Take Tenet's protagonist, literally called the protagonist. He has no backstory, no personal life, no character traits beyond competence and determination. He's essentially a vessel for the audience to experience the film's time inversion concept. Or consider Dunkirk, where Nolan deliberately avoids traditional character development. We don't see flashbacks to soldiers' homes or families. We don't learn their deepest fears or their dream. They're defined purely by their actions in the moment. This isn't accidental. This is a deliberate artistic choice. Nolan is fundamentally interested in ideas, concepts, and structures more than he is in the inner emotional lives of characters. His films aren't about people changing. They're about people navigating impossible situations that challenge our understanding of reality, time, memory, and identity. When we argue about whether a movie is good or bad, we're often talking past each other because we're using different criteria. So I've created this flowchart that breaks film analysis into three fundamental questions. Does it fit or extend its cultural and genre context? Is its writing logically congruent and or closing a loop? And does it deliver on its premise? What's fascinating about this framework is that it helps us pinpoint exactly where disagreements about a film's quality actually lie. Sometimes we're not even arguing about the same aspects of a film. And this is particularly useful when looking at Nolan's work because his films often excel in some categories while potentially falling short in others. Let's apply this framework to two contrasting Nolan films: Inception, which he wrote himself and is arguably his most successful film to date, and Insomnia, adapted by Hilary Seitz from a Norwegian film, which very few reference when talking about Nolan's works.
If I were to do this, if I even could do it, I'd need a guarantee. How do I know you can deliver?
You don't. But I can.
Let's start with Inception. Does it fit or extend its context? Absolutely. As an auteur film, it's remarkably consistent with Nolan's fascinations: time, memory, reality, and guilt. As a heist film, it brilliantly extends the genre by setting the heist within dreams. It's innovative while respecting its context. Is it well written? Well, this is where things get interesting. The plot is logically congruent. It establishes rules for its dream world and follows them consistently. It has a fairly well-defined beginning, middle, and end. However, the characters present a more complex case. Are the characters logically and morally consistent? Yes, they behave according to their established motivations, but do they evolve meaningfully within the film's dramatic argument? This is where some viewers find Inception lacking. Outside of Cobb, the supporting characters exist primarily as functions. The forger, the architect, the chemist, they have skills rather than fully fleshed out personalities. Even Cobb's emotional journey, his guilt over Mal's death and separation from his children, is told more than shown. And yes, while I know it is literally shown, this is what we're referencing when we talk about over-exposition or telling rather than showing. It serves the plot mechanics more than it explores genuine human complexity. Now, does Inception deliver on its premise? And this is where I might disagree with some of my contemporaries, but it did promise a mind-bending heist through dreamscapes, and it delivered that with stunning visual imagination and technical precision. However, I expected emotional growth, something to connect to. The marketing at least aligned with the film, which isn't always a given, so there's that. So when someone says Inception is a masterpiece, they're likely responding to its contextual innovation, logical plot construction, and premise delivery. When someone says Inception left me cold, they're probably reacting to the character development aspect, a legitimate internal flaw within an otherwise brilliantly constructed film. Neither perspective is wrong, they're simply prioritizing different aspects of the film. Now, let's examine Insomnia through the same lens.
Why would he clip the nails after scrubbing them?
Manipulating the body, prolonging the moment.
No mutilation.
Not this time.
You think there's been others?
No. But there's gonna be.
Does it fit or extend its context? As a remake of a Norwegian film, it respects the source material while adapting it for American audiences. As a psychological thriller, it follows genre conventions while adding Nolan's distinctive visual style. As part of Nolan's filmography, it's somewhat of an outlier, more straightforward in structure than his other works, but thematically consistent in its exploration of guilt and moral compromise. Is it well written? The plot follows a logical progression, with each development arising naturally from character choices, but the real strength lies in the character writing. Are the characters logically or morally consistent? Absolutely. Will Dormer's actions, while sometimes morally questionable, always align with his established character? His internal conflict, his growing guilt and deteriorating mental state is the driving force of the narrative. Do the characters evolve meaningfully? And yes, this is where Insomnia differs most significantly from Inception. Dormer undergoes a genuine character arc. He begins as a compromised but principled detective and ends as a man forced to confront his own corruption. His final confession represents growth, a painful recognition of his moral failure. Does Insomnia deliver on its premise? Yes, it promised a psychological thriller, but a detective's moral unraveling in a place where the sun never sets, and it delivered exactly that. The marketing aligned with the experience. What's fascinating is that Insomnia excels in the very area where some find Inception lacking: character development. Dormer isn't just a vehicle for exploring concepts. He's a fully realized human being whose internal struggle is the heart of the film. This comparison raises an interesting question. Why does Insomnia feature stronger character development than many of Nolan's self-written works? The answer likely lies in the collaborative nature of filmmaking. Insomnia was written by Hilary Seitz based on the screenplay by Nikolaj Frobenius and Eric Skjoldbjerg. I totally butchered that. Nolan directed, but didn't write it. This suggests that when working with material centered on character psychology rather than high concepts, Nolan is perfectly capable of creating emotionally resonant, character-driven cinema. We see a similar pattern in his collaborations with his brother, Jonathan Nolan. The films they co-wrote, Memento, The Prestige, the Dark Knight trilogy, Interstellar, often feature stronger character works than Nolan's solo screenplays. This pattern suggests something interesting. Nolan may benefit from creative partnerships that balance his conceptual focus with stronger character development. When he works alone, the balance shifts decisively towards concept over character. Returning to our analytical framework, we can identify a key distinction in Nolan's approach to character. revelation versus growth. In traditional character-driven narratives, protagonists undergo transformation. They want something external, but need something internal. Through conflict and choice, they change, usually learning that what they needed was more important than what they wanted. Nolan's protagonists rarely undergo this kind of transformation. Instead, they're often steadfast figures whose function is to navigate the film's high-concept premise. They don't change. The world around them does, or more accurately, our understanding of that world changes. In Memento, Leonard doesn't grow or change as a character. He can't due to his condition. Instead, our perception of him transforms as we learn more about his true nature. The emotional impact comes not from his development, but from our dawning realization about who he really is. This is Nolan's signature move, emotional impact through revelation rather than transformation. We learn who characters truly are, rather than watching them become something new. Insomnia stands out precisely because it offers both. We learn who Dormer truly is, revelation, while watching him confront the consequences of his actions, potential growth. His final confession represents a change, an acceptance of responsibility that wasn't present at the beginning. This distinction helps explain why some viewers find Nolan's films emotionally distant. We're conditioned to expect character growth in serious drama. When Nolan offers revelation instead, it can feel intellectually stimulating but emotionally incomplete. But again, this isn't a failure. It's a different approach to storytelling. Nolan is more interested in using characters to explore ideas than exploring characters for their own sake. His films ask, what would happen if? Rather than, who is this person becoming? So why does this create such heated debate? Because Nolan occupies a unique position in our film culture. He makes intellectual art films with blockbuster budgets and marketing. He's simultaneously populist and elitist. His films promise the emotional satisfaction of mainstream cinema, but deliver the cerebral challenge of art house fare. This is the Nolan Paradox. He's created a new category of cinema that doesn't quite fit our existing frameworks for evaluation. We argue about his films because we're still figuring out how to talk about what they even are. Consider how we discuss other filmmakers. We don't criticize Michael Bay for lack of philosophical depth or Terrence Malick for insufficient action sequences. We understand what they're trying to do and judge them accordingly. There's another dimension to film discourse that deserves our attention, one that lurks in comment sections, dominates Reddit threads, and occasionally ruins perfectly good dinner conversation. I call it the "you just don't get it" defense. You've seen this play out. Someone mentions they found Tenet confusing, Blade Runner 2049 slow, or The Lighthouse pretentious, and immediately they're met with, you probably need to watch it again, or it's not the movie's fault, you couldn't follow it, or my personal favorite, maybe you should just stick to Marvel movies. This isn't just a Nolan fan phenomenon. It's the calling card of the modern film bro. That particular breed of cinephile who's watched every A24 release, keeps a Letterboxd account meticulously updated, and somehow manages to reference Tarkovsky in casual conversation. Let's be real for a moment. There's an undeniable satisfaction in getting a complex film that others find impenetrable. When you understand the metaphysical implications of the Tree of Life, or can explain why Synecdoche, New York is actually a perfect film, there's a sense of accomplishment. You've cracked the code. You're part of an exclusive intellectual club. This creates a fascinating psychological dynamic where understanding certain films becomes a marker of identity. Your taste in movies isn't just entertainment preference, it's a personality trait, a statement about your intellectual capacity. And this transforms film discourse from appreciation into gatekeeping. The problem isn't appreciating complex cinema. That's wonderful. The problem is the assumption that if someone didn't like a challenging film, they must not have understood it. This defense mechanism completely bypasses legitimate questions about pacing, character development, or emotional resonance. It reduces all criticism to a matter of intellectual comprehension. I can fully understand what Malick was attempting to do in To the Wonder, while still finding it indulgent. I can follow Lynch's dream logic in Mulholland Drive while wishing certain sequences were tightened. I can appreciate the technical brilliance of Tenet while finding its characters underdeveloped. Understanding and enjoyment are different dimensions of the viewing experience. What's particularly revealing is how this defense flattens the rich, multi-dimensional experience of cinema into a single axis, getting it versus not getting it. It's the cinematic equivalent of reducing a symphony to whether you can identify the time signature. Technical understanding is just one aspect of artistic appreciation. Great films work on multiple levels simultaneously: intellectual, emotional, visual, thematic. They engage both our minds and our hearts. When film bros reduce cinema to just the puzzle aspect, they ironically miss the fullness of what makes great films transcendent, the harmony of all these elements working together. This gatekeeping has real consequences for film culture. It discourages honest reactions, especially from people who might feel intimidated by the serious film crowd. It creates an environment where people pretend to like certain movies because admitting confusion or boredom might get them labeled as intellectually inferior. And ultimately, it makes conversations about cinema less interesting, less honest, and less inclusive. So the next time someone condescendingly tells you that you just don't get a film because you didn't enjoy it, remember, you might understand the film perfectly well. You might just be valuing different aspects of the cinematic experience. And that's not just okay, it's what makes conversations about films so endlessly fascinating when we drop the pretense and engage with genuine curiosity. After all, the most interesting film discussions happen when we move beyond binary judgments of getting it or not getting it, good or bad, art versus schlock, and explore the rich territory of why we respond to films the way we do. That's where the real cinematic conversation begins. So the next time you find yourself in a heated debate about whether Tenet is brilliant or nonsensical, whether Inception is moving or mechanical, remember the Nolan Paradox. The debate itself is evidence of Nolan's unique position in cinema, making films that are simultaneously accessible and challenging, spectacular and cerebral, familiar and strange, and in an industry increasingly dominated by formulaic franchise entries. That achievement alone is worth celebrating, even if we'll never stop arguing about whether his characters could use a bit more development. And that is the cycle of art. Thanks for watching.